Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, Insurance Broker to the Stars. I apologize for not uploading last week. I was speaking at ConnectWise IT Nation down in Florida, but this week we're going to be talking about something very, very important. Please stick around to the end. This is getting smart, how to build defense in depth for your MSP. Now, I'm not talking about cybersecurity. I'm talking about liability. So before we jump into that, this is my latest book, Damage Control, Cyber Insurance and Compliance. That is the link where you can download it for free. All right, before we begin, you need to know some key concepts because these are actually going to pop up numerous times throughout this presentation. So just stick with me for this part. The two key ideas you need to remember are going to be Article 3 standing and the elements of a contract. And I'm going to explain what those are. So first, Article 3 standing. Let's say somebody wants to bring a lawsuit against you. How do they begin to do that? Well, one of the first things they actually need to do is essentially establish standing. Now, you'll see in front of you, Supreme Court of the United States has said at an irreducible minimum, so this is like a must-have in most circumstances, the plaintiff needs the following. Injury in fact. They have to show I have somehow been damaged as a result of 2, traceability, that person, in this instance, providing professional services to my business. So that would be providing services as an MSP. And 3, redressability, which in today's day and age just means money. So if I can get money out of this, I will be made whole again. Now, the other part of this was the 3 elements of a contract. The first is going to be an offer. Hey, I can help you solve that problem, but you have to accept my help to do that. And consideration, if we're going to do this, if I'm going to help you, I'm going to charge you some amount of money for that service. So the 3 elements of a contract. Very important you remember that as we go through this. Now let's talk about starting right for your MSP. The first is going to be client screening. Now, I know this doesn't sound super fun, super fascinating, but it's way more important than you guys would really realize. Why? People bring bad problems. People just assume that we are the most litigious country on earth, which is somewhat true, but those statistics are actually skewed. The vast majority of people will go their entire lives without ever personally filing a lawsuit against anybody else. There are something called vexatious litigants, and those are people who just continuously file frivolous lawsuits over and over and over again. And various states have various laws to eventually try and kick them out of the legal system to a large degree, which is obviously problematic in a free society, but these are people who file literally hundreds of lawsuits. An example would be, I believe that there was a prisoner who was trying to file a lawsuit because he said that the prison was giving him broken cookies and somehow that was a violation of his constitutional rights. Now, often what I hear from my clients after they have been sued, they have a claim, they're starting the process, they've gone through the process, they always start with, man, you know what, Joe, if I just would have known the background of this person, I never would have done business with them. So there's a couple tools that you can actually use. The first is Westlaw LexisNexis. That's pretty expensive. Generally, only people with a legal background are going to be able to utilize that. 2 is going to be pacer.gov. So if they have a unique personal name, unique business name, that's a great place to go to see if they have somehow been embroiled in lawsuits previously. Next, which is free, you can always utilize Google News. Shocking how much information is actually on there. So please consider using that as a resource before you're bringing clients in. And then finally, of course, you can always use a background screening service, a background check service. The more you pay, the deeper they go. But it's worth understanding before you enter into a legal relationship with another human being or set of human beings that you at least have an idea of kind of what that person is like. And I will just say on my end, even on the insurance side, I'm doing some digging before I decide to do business with anybody because frankly, I don't want to get sued either. I'm in the same boat that you guys are in. Now, continuing on with that particular topic, think about continuously reassessing, at least on a yearly basis, all of those clients you have. Broadly speaking, hey, are they going to be a good fit for your business? Possibly, they started out as a good fit and then they've just grown beyond your expertise. They're just growing in leaps and bounds, and you have to start thinking, okay, in terms of liability, are we potentially getting out of our comfort zone? If so, is there a way that we can remedy that? Or are these guys just growing so fast? Or are they just demanding things that we simply cannot offer? If so, it may be in your best interest to disengage from that client. Why? Because that is where people get in trouble. It's when you try to offer a service that you don't really know that much about. So for example, yes, I could, in theory, provide business owners policies and commercial auto policies. I know enough about those to be dangerous, but I just don't know enough to add any value, and I don't feel super comfortable doing it. So my firm just simply does not offer those types of insurance policies. We stick with what we know and what we are very good at. Tech E&O, cyber insurance, employment practices, the professional lines. Next, when you're sitting down with your list of clients, hey, have they taken your recommendations seriously, or are they just pinching every single penny and you know that that's a disaster waiting to happen? If it's a disaster waiting to happen, well, yes, you need to have defensive documentation on your side, but you could really be facing even a frivolous lawsuit where they're just trying to get a settlement out of you. So take that seriously. Next, are they worth the effort? Hey, you know what? Maybe they're paying you a lot of money, but the guy who always calls your text on the phone is just a giant jerk. And he is making the life of all of your texts just a living hell, and he's a terrible person. In that case, maybe that should go into the equation as well. Now, all this being said, disengage if necessary. We're going to talk about kind of an easy way to do that. I call this the George Costanza disengagement. And here it is. Now, obviously, this is just an example. Speak with an attorney first. But you'll see here, this is a lot of the, as I said before, George Costanza. It's not you, it's me. So you'll see as part of our annual business plan review, we conducted an analysis in an effort to focus the future direction of our practice. As we've mentioned, blah, 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 blah. Accordingly, we have reviewed our clients' needs to determine how each client fits in with the future direction of our practice. As you can imagine, this was not an easy task in that the list includes numerous business and personal relationships that span many years and events. Nevertheless, the result of our annual review and analysis is that we must ask you to refer your network and cybersecurity matters to another professional effective immediately. We hope you understand. We've had a pleasure working with you, et cetera, et cetera. So real kind of an easy way to just slide on out of that. There's going to be multiple other considerations here with what that language says, if they still owe you money, how the turnover is going to go. So please speak with an attorney before you start doing this. Next, let's talk about those contracts. Some of you I know have just grown out of the break fix area. Some of you who are watching this have probably just started an MSP, and right, I know I also started a business, so I understand when you're first starting out, man, it's every single dollar counts. But with that, you got to be careful about the contracts. First, you have to have a contract. Like I said before, if you grew out of that break fix, maybe you just never had contracts, and so this is kind of a foreign area to you. But without a contract, it's going to be he said, she said. And the first thing that's going to happen if you have a claim is your defense attorney is going to want to see the contract or contracts that you had with that client. And if you don't have a contract that is well crafted and is signed by both parties, generally you're going to have a very, very hard time. And it's hard to really relate to you via video, just the stress, the anxiety, that sort of Damocles that's hanging over your head where every night you go to bed and you're wondering, okay, what's going to come tomorrow? Am I getting another letter? It really interrupts the flow of your work. It's just a really nightmarish time, and I would not wish that on any of you. Thankfully, to some degree, I've only seen that third hand, so I've only seen my clients go through it, but it is not a fun process. It's not as simple as, hey, I got a defense attorney, he's going to take care of everything. There's way more to it than that. Now, if you do have a contract and it is well constructed, it's, hey, I said X, they said no, or this is the strict bounds of this contract. What they're alleging is outside the bounds of this contract, and it was entered into by two sophisticated business parties. Make sure you're going to clarify what it is you're doing, and just as important, what it is you are not doing, because there's a lot you could not be doing that may be material to that particular claim. And the last thing you're going to want is some type of ambiguity there. So make sure you have both bases covered. If you run into a circumstance where clients are going, wait a minute, I've been working with you a long time. We've never had a contract. Why do we need a contract now? Like, I thought everything was going smoothly. Just blame your insurance company. Literally, it works every time. Everybody hates insurance companies. Myself, probably even more so than you, because I get to deal with them on a daily basis. So just blame the insurance company. It's an easy way to write that off. This is also an opportunity, I would add, for you to go through that contract line by line, be specific, be completely transparent. And when you start going through that list of things you're not doing, in many circumstances, that's a great opportunity for you to be just talking face to face with that business owner, going, hey, here's what we're not doing. And in some circumstances, they just don't even know what those words mean. So it's a great opportunity for you to explain what those additional services would be and how that could potentially add value and mitigate threats to their business as you move forward. And throughout the year, services, could be added on. So for example, with the large spike in ransomware, I know everybody now is throwing in security awareness training. So with that, don't be afraid to modify your contracts, have addendum to contracts, whatever your attorney recommends and advises to you, because you want to make sure that everything you're doing or not doing is encapsulated within those legal agreements. And next, please do not copy contracts. Do not hop on Reddit and ask a business owner for some other MSP for their particular contracts. You're just going to get burned doing that. There's a high probability that could come back and really bite you in the butt there. You'll see here, I'll put a link in the description below for this particular video. Limitation of liability in contracts, saving grace or fool's errand. Moral of the story is there is a reason that attorneys get paid so well per hour, and it's because this is a very, very nuanced and technical area where, even if you have a client across a state line, that could completely change what's even admissible in that contract. So please make sure you speak with competent legal counsel, get those contracts appropriate and in place. All right, speaking of contracts, let's talk about alternative dispute resolution methods. So I've seen a bunch of posts where people are like, hey, I've got this issue. The guy doesn't want to pay me. What should I do? Or I've got this, this tricky circumstance here, and it looks like we're just not getting along with the client. I'm not really sure how to fix that. That is where alternative dispute resolution, ADR methods actually come into play. There are two primary methods that you can utilize. That would be mediation and arbitration. So let's chat about mediation. Now, first, it's generally going to be cheaper and faster than litigation, which I think is good for everybody. The mediator rarely needs some deep understanding of technical issues, and you can avoid that legal trail, and you can generally minimize the bad blood between the two parties. So it's really just as simple as, hey, you know what? I think we got a problem here. We're going to bring in an unbiased third party, and we're just going to talk through this and see if we can hash it out, bury the hatchet, and just move on with business. Now, you can utilize this as an opportunity to demonstrate your expertise. Generally, mediation is non-binding. So let's say worst case scenario, you go to mediation and it turns out, hey, that mediator was just trash. And that whole thing just went sideways. And that mediator is recommending something that you are just completely uncomfortable in providing. Well, in that case, you probably have, if it's constructed appropriately in your contract, the ability to continue on with litigation if you absolutely need to. And believe it or not, mediation is actually really successful. So you'll see there it's been about 80-ish, 83% successful over the years. It's actually held pretty steady. So very, very successful method where you can try and salvage that particular relationship, because that's going to be a lot cheaper than probably going out, finding new clients, making up that lost revenue, potentially having your name or your firm name, your MSP's name dragged through the mud. All right, next, let's talk about arbitration. Oh, I should add, mediation is generally for general disputes, right? There's some general dispute amongst the parties. Arbitration is good for fee disputes. So they owe you money. You think they owe you money. We're going to talk about why that is. First, you can generally control the design of the process. So i.e. appeals following arbitration, if you want to allow that or not. Also, generally a lower cost than litigation. It's also generally faster than litigation. There's also an expedited option for claims less than $75,000. So for most MSPs, that's going to be a potentially very viable option for you. It's also likely confidential, so your name much less likely to be in the legal record for others to find. You also may have the opportunity to actually select the arbitrator, which is a very good deal for you. So if I'm ever anywhere and I don't want to talk to somebody and they ask me what I do, I just say insurance. And people run for the hills because nobody wants to hear about insurance. I get it. You also have to understand that if you go to court, who is going to be sitting on the jury? And in what location would that trial actually take place? Well, maybe the judge is 80 years old and has zero concept of technology, and he has got his clerk writing his emails for him because he doesn't know how to open Google Chrome. Or you got a bunch of people on a jury and they are just not technical people. Don't just assume because you're right that you are going to win. Those are two completely separate topics. And I hate to be cynical like that, but I've just seen it time and time again. So please do not confuse those two ideas. Also, you have the finality of decision. Once again, this is why we like arbitration for fee disputes, and you can consider that. Because it's, hey, this guy didn't pay me. Arbitrator, we did this work. You can see it here. This is what that work meant. It was in our contract that they were supposed to pay us for that. They have not paid us. And I will say that the Supreme Court has upheld like 4 different times where people have tried to argue their way out of binding arbitration, and it has not worked in their favor. So very, very strong method for you there. All right, next let's talk about suing for fees, because that could burn you too. So generally I'm going to say it's probably just a bad idea to sue to collect fees. Why? Because maybe you should have tried arbitration, maybe you should have tried mediation, depending upon the circumstance. But if you're going to sue to collect fees, almost without exception, you're going to face a counterclaim. And do not underestimate the ability of the plaintiff's bar to come up with 1,000 different reasons that their client is going to sue you. What's the name of the game there? It's, if I'm going down, you're coming with me. And if you want to make this lawsuit happen, you are going to spend more money defending a counterclaim than I am going to pay you for whatever fees that I could potentially owe you. So once again, suing for fees, generally a bad idea. Consider using that arbitration for fee disputes. Talk to an attorney to have that in your contract as appropriate. And there's a bunch of other things you can do. You can talk to your attorney about retainer fees, stop work loss provisions. You can set up your business just in the way that you actually render professional services to make that happen. There's a bunch of different tools that you can have in your toolkit as an MSP that can be very, very beneficial for you to avoid the circumstance where you're just not getting paid. And of course, work with a qualified legal counsel. Next, this is all building up that defense in depth. Contractually requiring cyber insurance. Let's go back to that Article 3 standing discussion that we had before. What do you need for Article 3 standing? Injury in fact, traceability, redressability, aka I've been injured, it's your fault, and if you give me money, that will make me whole again. Well, with that, what are you trying to do here? You were trying to shift the blame from you to their cyber insurance company, or more specifically, you're saying, hey, your cyber insurance should have taken care of this, so we'll take like a business interruption reimbursement claim. Let's say your client had ransomware. Well, now you're trying to take out one of the three legs of Article 3 standing, which would be that redressability. So at least you're taking out a lot of big ticket items there, potentially, to try and avoid that lawsuit to begin with. Now, yeah, they could always come back and get reimbursed somehow from their cyber insurance company, but then bring some other claim against you. It's like negligence, gross negligence, breach of contract, unjust enrichment, that kind of thing. But generally, those dollar figures are going to be a lot lower than you would find in business interruption reimbursement type claims against your E&O policy. And because of that, that really tries to change the dynamic. Because if they're going, okay, well, you know what, I could sue you for 25 grand for like, breach of contract or gross negligence or something. Maybe the threshold is there's just too much pain and uncertainty there for me to kind of go after that. Whereas if they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in business interruption costs because ransomware got to their system, that obviously changes the economics and the dynamics of their ability to try and bring a lawsuit against you. Quick side note here. If you are going to be assessing cyber insurance policies or opining to some degree on those, once again, I would say, one, you probably don't want to be selling cyber insurance policies or going through some third party that offers cyber insurance policies through your firm name. There's a million reasons why that's really a bad idea, and you can get in a lot of trouble for that. But if you're going to be looking at these cyber insurance policies, there's really kind of two things you want to look at: dependent system failure and dependent system business interruption. What does that mean? That means if your MSP goes down, either because of some type of cyber event or because of some system failure, let's say a bad patch in that circumstance, and your client cannot generate revenue, that is when their cyber insurance policy could potentially make them whole again, once again trying to remove one of those legs of Article 3 standing and the ability for them to try and bring a claim against you, or at least make it much less, I would say, favorable or juicy for them to try and do that. Now, you may be saying, hey, if I put a contractual requirement for all of my clients to carry cyber insurance inside of my contracts, what happens if they just don't do it? Well, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. But let's say something pops up. Well, there is a potential there that you could bring a counterclaim against them for breach of contract, and you could justly argue, hey, what you're suing me for should have been covered under this cyber insurance policy that you agreed to buy. It's not my fault you didn't buy it. So therefore, you got a lot more ammunition on your side. I'm not saying it's foolproof, but you want to start thinking about building up that defense in depth. It's just one other wall that you can start erecting between your client and your firm. If you have any questions, if people go, hey, why are you now requiring this? Easiest explanation is, hey, blame the insurance company. I'm an MSP. My tech insurance company is saying we have to contractually require all of our clients to carry cyber insurance, or our rates are just going to go through the roof and it's going to cost everybody way more money and it'll be a nightmare. Always easy to blame the insurance company. There's also a bunch of other very practical reasons that you can consider. It's actually in that video. I'll put a link in the description below. But suffice to say, you don't want your tech E&O policy to be a piggy bank for every time, say the CFO at a client or Becky in accounting at a client does something wrong or wires a couple $100,000 out the door. So look at that video once you're done here if you're interested in that particular topic. Next, let's talk about just kind of throughout the year. What are some other things you need to consider? Well, one, always offer that higher level of service. What are the steps to success here? One, offer that higher level of service. Even if you know, I've had MSPs call me and they go, I know you're saying offer this higher level of service. I promise you they're not going to buy this stuff. They're just penny pinching, or they don't believe that it works, or whatever the case may be. And what I immediately tell that MSP, my client, is, I understand, but I don't care. It's in your best interest to do that. Make sure you're documenting it in writing, and for the super high risk clients, you can have the check yes or no box with, hey, I fully understand the risk inherent with not implementing these additional levels of controls, blah, blah, blah. You can also consider waivers of liability. Why? Why are we doing this? You go back to the 3 elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, usually money. You are offering a potential contract to your client. Your client is turning that down. Once again, more defense in depth for your MSP when that lawsuit inevitably comes your way. Next, let's talk about more offensive documentation here. So newsletters, scam alerts. If you've ever wondered why your CPA firm or your business law firm, they send you those newsletters and you're like, who reads this stuff? So your CPA could send out some newsletter and it's like, alert, changes to some IRS circular, blah, 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 blah. And you're sitting there and you're like, 1, who has the time to read this? 2, even if I read it, I'm not even going to understand it. Like, why do they keep peppering me with this stuff? Well, they've been doing it for decades because people like me have been telling them to do it. And the entire reason why they do it is I told you so. That's what this is all about. It's if a claim arises and they can go back to those newsletters and you build this up over, say, months or years or potentially a decade or more, where you're warning your clients, those business owners, about this particular threat and they still didn't do anything about it, now you got more defense on your particular side there. And of course, you can tie that in with additional service offerings. So you can say, hey, there's a big spike in ransomware, for example. And here are some additional controls that if you don't already have implemented, may be able to mitigate that threat. If you're interested in talking about ransomware or implementing some additional controls to try and mitigate that threat, please let us know and we'd be happy to talk to you. What are you really doing here? We're going back to the 3 elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, usually for money. Now, once again, you're saying, hey, judge or jury, I told them this was a problem. I even offered to help them fix it, and they still didn't come to me. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? So what happens when you add all of this up? Well, think about it this way. Defense in depth for your own business. You take all these tools. What's going to happen? Telling the judge or the jury, hey, I put it in writing. I told them this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing. I told them, hey, this was a risk. I warned them. I said, hey, this could be a problem. I offered to help the client even after that. They still said no and potentially put it in writing that they still didn't want me to help them with this potential problem that was out there. And then with all that, I said, hey, you need to buy cyber insurance. That could also potentially mitigate this threat later on the line if a threat does get through. Maybe they didn't buy cyber insurance, so they had a whole bunch of damages. They lost a whole bunch of money there. This is what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get the judge and the jury to look at you and go, man, you did all these things for your client and they just ignored you. And does this mean that you are never going to face a claim? No. Does it mean you're going to win every claim? No. But what it does mean is now you have a lot more arrows in your quiver there where you can start firing back against the, hey, the tech guy didn't do what he was supposed to do argument. And you could say, I warned you. I put it in writing. I've done it over a long period of time. I can't help you if you don't pay attention to the threats that I'm bringing to your attention. And so I think this is a very, very powerful set of tools that you could really consider utilizing within your own MSP or MSSP to try and keep those claims at bay, or if possible, try and mitigate the severity and the length of those claims, because those are not going to be fun. And I will just say this. Look where the smart money and the big brains are going. Trying to get E&O insurance for an MSP is getting a lot harder. It's also getting a lot more expensive. And there are entire insurance companies out there going, the risk is so high, we are not even going to offer at any cost E&O insurance to MSPs anymore. So what does that tell you? The people who have teams of attorneys whose only job is to look at all of the case law in all of the jurisdictions and use all of these forecasting models are saying, this is going to get bad. We should not be part of this. Or if we are going to be part of this, we got to start really jacking up those rates, the premiums that we're charging MSPs, because we need to get ready for these lawsuits that are here now and the cost of lawsuits that are going to be coming down the pike. So make sure you keep that in mind. All right, next, let's talk about if it all goes sideways. So yes, ideally, a claim would hit your desk. Your defense attorney goes, man, you've got all of these newsletters, and you've got scam alerts, and you've got everything in writing, and you've got a bulletproof contract, and you warn them, and you offered all of these potential contracts with these people, and you took a leg out from their claim by removing that redressability because they had cyber insurance. But that's not to say that it can't still go sideways, and people can't bring frivolous lawsuits against you when they're desperate because they're just trying to claw money back. So if it all goes sideways, please make sure you have the right tech E&O policy. So first, this is a big 80-20 here. I'm going to make an entire video later on about how to look and think about tech E&O insurance for MSPs. But the 80-20 of this is you have to look at the definition of professional services and technology services, because that's really going to be the heart of the policy. What does that mean? It means, hey, we're going to cover you for these services and allegations of wrongful acts that involve these services. So if that definition isn't broad enough, if it doesn't really encapsulate what you're doing, if you're doing something outside the bounds of those definitions, then you could have a partial declination of coverage, or God forbid, even a full declination of coverage, because the insurance company is saying, hey, we didn't cover you for doing these things. We only covered you for those things. So make sure you keep that in mind. If you have a separate E&O and a separate cyber policy, you are likely doing it wrong. And that means you probably bought it from a general agent. And that means you could be in a world of issues moving forward that you're probably unaware of. First is there could be overlap there when you have a client bringing a claim against you, which means you would have to notify both insurance companies, depending upon the fact pattern of the case. That also means you may end up paying both of those deductibles, which means you now have a lot more risk in a monetary sense than you otherwise anticipated when you bought those policies. Next, you could be dealing with multiple insurance companies. So when you have two different insurance companies, they each have their hand in the pot there. They each want to run the defense their own way. Now you're just talking about even more stress and even more unnecessary complexity when you could have just had everything wrapped up in one nice little tech E&O policy. And to take a step back real fast, just keep in mind that tech E&O policies generally have two parts. They have the E&O side, and they also have the cyber side, and they're combined into one policy to try and avoid these specific issues. Next, when you have an E&O policy and a cyber policy, on that E&O policy, generally that's going to be a miscellaneous or just kind of a general E&O policy. And then you would have some type of, say, technology services endorsement that's added onto that. Once again, the definition is going to be a lot more narrow, so the probability that you could be facing a claim where some of the allegations are either partially or fully outside the definition of professional services and technology services, me personally, I just think it's way too high to even operate that way. So I would never sell an MSP an E&O policy and a separate cyber policy, unless maybe there's just really unique circumstances that don't even come to mind as I sit here. So please just make sure you take that warning seriously. And of course, you have to keep in mind that tech E&O policies, they're all different. It's just not the same thing. So make sure you're kind of taking a look at what coverage options are available to you. So this is just a brief put together comparison chart that I did for a client a couple weeks ago. And you'll see here, some of these are going to be really important coverage features. Some of these could just be meaningless coverage features. So for example, maybe you're really worried about crypto jacking because of the rise of cryptocurrencies and the prices associated with them. Maybe you're like, hey, I don't care at all. Maybe you're really worried about bricking coverage because your MSP just owns a lot of hardware. You got a lot of servers in-house. Maybe you could care less about bricking coverage because you're like, well, if everything just goes to hell, I'll just buy new laptops for the crew because that's going to be cheaper and everything's in the cloud anyways, so who cares? It really just depends on your MSP, and you got to kind of talk through these particular coverage features with really a knowledgeable insurance guy, or once again, you could just face a partial uncovered claim, especially on the first party side. All right, next, just make sure that, hey, when it comes to insurance, really with all the coverage features that, us insurance guys tend to obsess over, you're most likely to screw yourself. How is that? I can't talk about it here. This is like another 10-minute video, and I've been going on for way too long. God bless you if you're still with me, but I'll link to this video down below, the most important insurance lesson I can teach you. Please do not late report potential claims. I just dealt with an issue like that. Not for an MSP, it's for a different person who's actually not even my client. They just called me up to ask for help, and that could really go sideways. And you're talking probably almost a 7-figure loss for those guys because they thought they had something under control. They didn't report it. They renewed their policy. It turns out it was a way bigger deal than they thought. And now there's a pretty high potential they could go bankrupt. So please don't fall into that category. Watch that video after this one. Next, make sure you watch this video. Let me move my little beautiful head here. I'll go to this side. 3 insurance exclusions that can really screw you. So just keep this in mind. When we were kids, our dads always told us, hey, if you make a mistake, you own up to it, you fix it, you move forward. Unfortunately, insurance is like the exact opposite of that. So if you're interested in that topic, link in the description below. Make sure you watch that video. All right, next, here we go. Let me move back. That's the end of my presentation here. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed that. I tried to give you a bunch of tools in as short as time as possible to try and mitigate those future claims against your business, or try and push those claims off if they do come your way. Or if you do face a claim, try to lower the severity of that. If you like this video, here's another video right above my head. Don't forget to download my book, and over there, if you click on my beautiful face, you can subscribe to my channel where there's a new video every Thursday. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and with that, stay safe.